Hi guys, welcome in, welcome in. So good to see everybody this Wednesday. So for those of you who have not taken a class with me before, my name is Sarah. I am a Beadalon design team member, and I've got a really fun class for you guys this week. We're going to be using the tying station. And I actually, in my last class, used the tying station for a project, and we had a lot of fun with it. So we're gonna use it again. It's one of my favorite Beadalon tools, and fortunately for you, you can grab one over at Michael's, as well as all of the other supplies needed to create this project. So we're going to be creating a bracelet project that looks like a faux stack of bracelets. In other words, it's going to look like you have on several bracelets, but when you turn it over and look at the back, you're going to see that it all comes down to one singular loop and one singular button. There is no other hardware involved. So this is going to be a leather-based project with some B-Lon. It's going to be pretty lightweight, which is perfect for when the weather is warm. I don't know where you are and what the temperature is like, but it is already in the 80s and it's not even June yet here where I am. So lightweight jewelry is definitely where I want to be headed with my projects. The second thing about this before we get started is that this project is what I would consider a pretty unisex project. I struggle with men's jewelry, and I know that a lot of you out there do as well. This project could very easily be adjusted and turned into a man's bracelet. You obviously wanted to make it maybe a little bit bigger, so you would want to maybe adjust the size and maybe adjust some of the beads or the techniques a little bit, but this very easily could be turned into a more masculine bracelet, if you will. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to turn you guys around and we're going to talk about all the materials that you need to create today's project. All right, so first and foremost, you're going to need your tying station. And if you've had classes with me before, you know how much I love this, but I'm going to go ahead and give you a quick rundown of this for those of you who are not familiar with it. So the tying station is a really handy tool that you can use for several kinds of projects, not just bracelet projects. But it's great for wrap bracelets where you're making, long lengths of bracelets. You can make friendship style bracelets on this. You can make necklaces on this. It is a great tool because you can attach at the top. You can also secure your work at the bottom, and then you can get your hands free to work on your project. You could also have the ruler on the edge so that you can keep up with your measurements as you go, which I find very, very handy, particularly when I'm working on bracelets. The measurement actually starts at the peg here, which is where the center of your clasp or your attachment, whatever kind of hardware you're going to have, is going to be. And that makes it really easy. So I don't have to do any extra math. I don't know about you guys, but numbers are not my strong point. So I don't have to do any additional math to figure out the length when it starts exactly where my project starts. So that's really handy. All right, so I'll show you how to use this in just a second. You're going to need another Beadalon product. You're going to need some B-Lon. Now, this is just some nylon cording, and you can get it in a 3-pack, which I love. So you get the gray, the white, and the black. We're using the black for today's project, and you're going to need a lot of this. You're actually going to need 60-inch pieces, and you're going to need 3 in whichever color you choose, but I'm going to use the black. Okay, now as far as your other materials are concerned, it's pretty minimal. You're going to need some leather cord of your choice. I'm using black to go with my black B-Lon. And I like to grab the ones that are on the card that have the 3 different color choices. And there are a ton of these at Michael's to choose from. And you don't have to just get the round. I've seen it in other styles as well, and lots of colors to choose from. So take advantage of that. These cards last a really long time. I still have plenty of this left, and I've done several projects. Then you're going to need a button of some variety. I just grabbed a button that I had, but Michael's has a wonderful selection of buttons, and you need a shank style button for this because you're going to need to be able to thread your leather cord through the shank on the back. And a lot of times a 2-hole button or a 4-hole button, depending on the size of the holes, will not accommodate your leather. So I recommend a shank style button for this kind of project. And then you're going to need some beads, and I have a couple of bead choices here. So I picked out these are really cool 6mm wooden beads that are brown and black striped. I don't know, they're lightweight, they're fun. I love wooden beads as much as I love leather and, you know, soft cords for the summertime. This definitely seems very beachy. You could make it a little bit lighter as far as, you know, picking maybe gray over the black if you wanted it to be even lighter than that. Maybe white would look good, but keeping it kind of unisex, I went with the black. So last but not least are these little guys, these little beads. I love these. These are dyed reconstituted turquoise. They are 3mm by 8mm stone beads. So they're basically just rondelles. And you can see I've used not too many of them. I have plenty of them left. Okay. All right, so let's get started with our project. This is our sample piece. So just to show you where we're headed. So we're going to start with a loop in our knot. I'm sorry. We're going to start with a loop created by a knot in our leather. And then you can see it comes down to the single loop and it comes down to a single button. But what we've got going on in the middle looks like we have 4 different bracelets on. We have a couple of just empty strands of the leather, which are pretty cool all on their own. We've got some square knots with our B-Lon and our wooden beads, and then our really cool rondelle blue beads here. So when you put it on, it actually looks like you have on several bracelets, but you don't have to deal with putting on several bracelets. You only have to deal with just the single button. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and come to the tying station. I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to take off the wing nut and the washer and the acrylic plate. Every time I do a tying station project, people ask me about the little holes that are included on the acrylic plates. These are both on the top plate and down here on the other end on the bottom plate. And as many times I forget to answer this question. So I'm going to go ahead and address it right now before we even get started with the project, because somebody has already asked. For myself, I use these little holes because you can place them down just like this. If you're doing a macrame project where you're using more than one strand of something and you need to secure those ends, bring them down, I like to tie my ends to this, right? To each one of these loops. You can also do that on the other end. Also, if you wanted to treat your tying station like a loom and you wanted to warp, you could actually warp through these and have your warps coming this direction and do some looming projects in between here. So just look at the little holes here. They don't have an exact, an exact function, but they're handy to have, particularly when you're working with multi-strand designs. So just so you know, you can really use these in a lot of different ways, and a 8mm jump ring will clear that space. So if you wanted to attach with jump rings to work on your stringing material, you can do that as well. Okay. All right. So now for our actual project, we're going to take a piece of our leather cording, and you're going to need about 18 to 20 inches of this, kind of depending on how long you need your bracelet to be. We're going to be making a 7.5-inch bracelet. So about 18 inches of this is going to be plenty. We're going to fold it in half, and we're essentially making a loop here on the end. We're going to tie an overhanded knot to create an actual loop. And when we make our loop, before we tighten that down, we want to be sure that it is going to clear our button. So depending on what size button it is that you're using, make sure that your loop will accommodate the entire button. Okay, so pull that down nice and tight. Tighten up your knot, and then we're just going to take that loop and place it over the peg on our tying station. Now we're going to put the acrylic plate down on top. We're going to put down our washer and then our wing nut. Don't forget the washer. If you forget the washer and you tighten down your wing nut too tight, you can crack that acrylic plate. So definitely don't want to lose that little washer. Okay, so we're going to tighten that down, and now we're going to come down here to the other end, and we're going to do the same thing. We are going to attach this, but I don't have to take the entire plate off down here on the bottom. Also, it's movable. So if you're working on a really short piece, you can adjust this so that the space you've got to work on, you can really kind of shorten it up if you've got a really short little area you want to work on. So we're going to come down here. I'm just going to slide the 2 ends underneath the acrylic plate, And then I'm going to tighten that down. So I didn't have to take that all the way off, but I do want to make sure they're nice and secure. Okay, so now we have all of this length here where we can begin to work on our bracelet. So the first thing you want to do is you want to bring in those pieces of the B-Lon. Now remember, I said when we were getting started how much of this you're going to need. You need 3 pieces of B-Lon that are cut to 60 inches each. So these are really, really long. Okay, and you want to find the middle. So I bring my ends together. Get them as close as possible. They don't have to be exact, but find all my ends and then find where the center of all 3 of those kind of come together. Okay, and I want to take the center of this and I want to put this underneath our 2 pieces of leather here that are attached. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create a square knot. And a lot of you who have taken classes with me before, we've done square knots several times. For those of you who maybe have never done any knotting, I'm going to walk you through this nice and slow, and then we're going to have the opportunity to do a lot more of these. Okay, so here at the top, just to secure our B-Lon, we're actually going to do 3 square knots. Now, a square knot happens in 2 steps. So the first step happens on the right-handed side. We're going to take our cord that's on the right-handed side, and it's a bundle of 3. Okay, this is not just a single, but we're using all 3 cords to make a P shape. And we want to be sure that the cords, the B-Lon, is going over the top of our leather. And we're going to refer to our leather here as the core. Okay, so our B-Lon is going over our core and making that P shape. We're going to take our left-handed cords, and you want to be sure that they're going over the top. So they're just kind of folding over the top of the right-handed cords that you've brought out here to the left. But then it's going to go behind our core and then up through that P shape or that loop that you made over here on the right-handed side. Pull all of those, and then you just want to pull to secure. That's the first step. I want to go ahead and slide this up right up next to the knot that's in our leather. And the second step of our square knot is just the same thing. Let me lower you down a little bit so you can get a little bit closer to this. That might help. It's kind of hard because we've got a lot of black going on here. So I'm going to try my best to make sure that everybody can see what I'm doing. So we're just going to repeat the same thing, but this time we're going to start on the left-handed side instead of the right. So we're making our P shape. It's actually a backwards P shape here. Okay. Our B-Lon is going across the top of our core. We're going to take our right-handed strands, just make sure that they are coming across the top of these strands that we've brought over, and we're going behind the core and up through the P shape. Okay, pull, and then we want to tighten everything down. Now, when you're tightening everything down, because you're using 3 strands at a time, sometimes you might need to pull individual strands just to make sure that your knot is nice and tight. But it only takes a second to really kind of tighten everything down. So that's our first knot. Now keep in mind that happens in 2 steps. We got to do the right and the left to create the entire knot. We're going to do that 2 more times. So again, we're going to start over here on the right. We're going to take our 3 right-handed cords and make our P shape coming across the core. Taking our left, make sure it goes across the top of those behind our core and up through that P shape that we created, and then pull. Okay, so that's step 1. Step 2 is the same thing, just opposite. So our left-handed cords making our little backwards P, our right-handed cords coming over the top of those behind the core and up through our backwards P shape, and pull. Now that makes 2. So you can see we've got 2 knots. Now, how can you tell with your square knots? Might be a little bit difficult to see with the black here, but you're going to notice a little bump. There's a bump here and then a bump here. Always on the right-handed side, you count your bumps. The first bump, that's one knot. The second bump, that's your second knot. Okay, that's how you're going to know how many knots you've created. So just kind of keep up with those little bumps. All right, so we're going to do one more. So our P shape on the right, taking our cords on the left, over, behind, and up, and pull. And now we're going to do the same thing on the left. So our backwards P shape, right-handed cords go over, behind, and up through. And pull. Okay, so now we have secured our B-Lon. We have taken up a little bit of the length here, but not much. We are a little over an inch. We're getting pretty close to the 1.5 inch mark here. So just keep that in mind as you're working, okay? Now what we have is the 2 center cords. Remember in our sample here, those don't have anything on them, so we don't have to do anything to them. But now we have these 2 sections of B-Lon where we have 3 strands each, where we can really kind of utilize these to create other strands in our bracelet. So we're going to start over here on the left-handed side with our 3 pieces of B-Lon on the left. So take your right side cords, just kind of move those out of the way. We don't need those, but you want to be sure that you don't get them mixed in because you'll get a big tangly mess. So we're going to create some more square knots. So let me show you this strand here. So basically we're doing 5 square knots and a bead. 5 square knots and a bead. And that's what the left-handed side of our bracelet is going to be. Now we're only going to do maybe, let's do 4 of these, and then we'll move on because it does take a while to do these knots, and we'll do a step out. Okay. And we'll move on to the right-handed side. But I do want to be sure that we understand all of the square knots for this side. So I'm going to go ahead and thread on 4 of my beads. So what I want to do is I want to take my 3 pieces of the B-Lon here, and I want to pick one that is like as close to the middle as possible. I'm going to call that this one. Okay. And I'm going to separate those out. I'm going to take this middle cord and I'm going to go ahead and thread on my wooden beads to that middle cord. Now I'm only threading on 4 because we're only gonna knot 4, but for a bracelet, there's 7, okay? Or I'm sorry, 8. So thread on all the beads that you're gonna use. Okay, now I'm gonna come down here to the bottom of the tying station, and I don't want to undo this because I don't want to lose the tension that I have on my leather. And this cord is a little bit thinner, so it's not going to get nice and tight with these guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slide that underneath the acrylic plate because there's room for it. And then I'm going to slide all the way around the acrylic plate. And I'm actually just going to wind this around the acrylic plate a few times. That's going to tighten that up, keep it nice and tight. I don't have to worry that it's going to come undone. I don't have to really do anything. And now I'm free to do my knotting on this cord. Okay. So I'm going to come up here. Just kind of have to move these guys out of the way as you're working, but we're going to do some more square knots, but this time we're going over this singular strand of B-Lon here. So we're going to do 5 square knots. I'm going to go over. Right, we're doing our P shape, and here in the beginning it's going to be kind of tricky because we've got to get used to working around our leather here. Just kind of keep it out of the way. I put my finger underneath here to hold it. So our P shape, our left-handed cord is going across and then behind, whoops, and up through. A little tricky here to get your fingers in there. Once you get the first few knots, it's a lot easier to manage. It's not hard. It's just a little tricky. So pull. Okay. And now we're going to repeat, but on the left. So our P shape. Under that core. Up through and pull. Okay. So we did a single square knot on this singular strand. Okay. So just kind of move these out of your way as much as you can so that you're just working on this singular strand. Let me move you down a little bit more. It might help You'll see a little bit better. Okay. And again, your right-handed strands, just kind of move those out of the way. Okay. We're only working with these. All right. So we need to do 4 more. So our right-handed P shape over our single core. Left hand, make sure it goes over the top of that one. Goes behind the core and up through. Pull. Okay, and we're going to do the left. So the left-handed P shape, cross over with our right, behind the core, and up through. And there's 2. Okay, so we're going to do more. So right-handed side, left, behind, and up through. Repeat on the left, P shape, backwards P shape, whichever, behind and up through. I wish I were using a different color just so that you could see it a little bit better, but I feel like you're getting the idea here. So we've got 1, 2, 3 of our square knots so far. We're going to do 2 more, and then we're going to slide up a bead, and then I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit with our square knots. So I'm still kind of walking through these nice and slow, but we are going to pick up the pace after we add a bead. So our P shape on the right, our left cord goes behind and up through and pull. Left side, our right side goes over the top, behind, and up through. So there's 4. Do 1 more, P shape on the right, behind, oops, and up through, maybe. Even I get my fingers kind of twisted around in here trying to avoid that leather. It's tricky. Okay, we're going to repeat on the left, our P shape, up through and pull. All right, now we're ready to slide up a bead. So we're going to slide a bead right on up next to the knots that we just made. Okay, and we're going to just knot right around it. So we're going to continue making square knots, just pretending like that bead is not there. Okay, so same thing, our P shape on the right, left-handed cord goes behind and up through, and that's going to lock that bead right into place, just knotting around it. Okay, same on the left, backwards P shape. Right-handed cord goes behind and up through, and that secures our bead. Okay, all right, now I'm going to speed up because we've got 3 more beads to add. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. So we've already done 1. We're going to do 4 more. Okay, right, up through, the left, and up through. So there's 2. Whoops, sorry guys. Right, pull. We're going to do the left and pull. So we've got 3 already, so we're moving right along. Okay, on the right, behind and up through. On the left, behind and up through. 1 more, right, and left, all right. Now remember, we want to count the bumps. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bumps, which means we've got 5 knots. So I'm going to take another bead and slide that up. We're just going to keep going. Okay, so on the right, lock that bead into place, and on the left. And that's going to secure that knot. So there's one. Do 4 more on the right, on the left, on the right, and on the left. Whoops. Cool. We've got 3, so we're going to do 2 more on the right, on the left, on the right, and on the left. All right, pull that up. We're going to count the little bumps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to slide up a bead. We're going to add this bead and 1 more, and then we're going to move on. Okay. So on the left, or I'm sorry, on the right, with our little P shape, lock the bead into place. You can adjust your B-Lon to where it sits up against that bead. And your left-handed second step of that knot is going to lock that knot in. So it's not going to move anymore. Okay. So this will be knot number 2. How are we doing out there? Has anybody got any questions? All right, working on knot number 3. Okay, knot number 4. Once you get the hang of the square knots, they work up pretty quickly. Even still, though, I don't want to make you sit here through the entire knotting of this. So that's why we're only doing half of the knotted section, and we're going to move on to the right-handed portion of our bracelet. But it's still, if you're working, you're still going to finish this in under an hour. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're ready to slide up a bead. And we're going to lock our bead in place with a knot around it. Just that cord. I like to have mine pretty even so that there's an even amount on the front and the back of my bead. I'm just kind of picky about that, but you don't have to be. Okay. All right, we're going to do 4 more knots and then we're going to move on. So here's our right, left, on the right, on the left, okay, 2 more. All right, last one. We'll do the right side and the left side. All right, so far, this is what we have. We've worked up half of the right-handed side, or I'm sorry, the left-handed side of our bracelet. Okay, so you would just continue going until you have added all of your beads. Now I've got one that has that much done. So I'm going to bring that one in so you can kind of see where we're at. All Let me undo my B-Lon here that I had just kind of tied out of the way. My right-handed side, but we're going to need that. So, all right. So this one is finished. I came all the way down. I've added all of my beads and I just stopped. Okay. There's nothing else to do yet, but you want to be sure that when you finish, you're finishing with your flat knots. Okay. Your square knots. So don't end with just a bead. Finish off with 5. Okay. And then just leave your ends because we're going to come back to that. We're not done with the ends here, but there's nothing that we need to do to those just yet. We're going to come back up here to the top of our bracelet, and we are going to now work on the 3 strands of the B-Lon that is on the right-handed side. So we are going to just create some little bundles of our beads. This part's super easy, works up really fast, but is always a cool look. And you can do this with necklaces, you can do this with bracelets, you can do this with whatever you want to. It looks cool just as a really long necklace, but I do like it in addition to this bracelet because it just kind of adds a little bit more fun and movement to our piece. So I'm going to trim off the end here so I can get to the rest of my beads. Okay, and we're going to do 3 beads at a time. But the first thing I want to do is I want to take all 3 of my cords here on this side, and I want to tie an overhanded knot right up against our square knot. And that might be a little tricky here. So you want to try to pull that knot down. Use a beading awl here if you want to, and just put it in that little loop as you're pulling your knot down. That'll place that knot exactly where you want it to be. Okay. If you have trouble getting it close. Okay. So now we don't need to attach these 3 strands to anything because we need to have them free so that we can work on them. For each strand, we're going to add 1 bead. So we're going to thread a rondelle on each one of our 3 strands here. Okay, now we just want to bundle our 3 strands together and just kind of position those beads wherever you want them to be. You can make this nice and tight if you want it to be a tight little section, or you can make it nice and open so that your beads have a little bit of movement in there. I like to have mine kind of open just so that they have a little bit of free range to, you know, do what they want to do. And then you can tie another overhanded knot. This is going to separate out your little beaded sections. Okay, so just going to bring all my cords down. Now you can see how my knot is a little loose. I'm going to pull my individual strands to tighten that up. Okay, so there's one little section. And now I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to keep going. We're going to add 3 beads at a time, 1 to each one of our strands. However, if you wanted to, you absolutely could fill this up with beads, right? So my beads have movement because it's just a single bead on each one of the individual strands. However, you could fill this up. Like I said, you could put, you know, 3 beads per strand if you wanted to. You could mix this up and add in some of the John bead seed beads. Some of the larger ones, the size 6s, look really cool next to these rondelles. So there's always ways to really change this up and make it more your own if you want to, and add even more color to this. All right, so I've got 3 beads. I'm going to pull my individual strands to tighten down my knot. And that'll make that knot nice and tight. So we just want to kind of every once in a while, after we've added some, bring it down and kind of to check in with the rest of your bracelet to make sure that you're not going over the length here. We still got plenty of room, but you want to be sure that you are not doing too many and end up working longer or not being able to knot at the end so that everything stays even. So just be mindful of where you are on your measurements. Okay, 3 more beads to each one of those strands. Just kind of drop all those down, bundle those together. Overhanded knot. I just loop around my fingers. And then secure the individual strands. Then you can really tighten up your knot. Okay, getting close. Looks like we have room for maybe 2 or 3 more of these. So add more beads. Got 3 beads, drop those down, kind of bundle them together, wrap around your fingers to create your knot. Looks like we have room for maybe 1 more. I don't want to overdo it because like I said, that's why I keep checking in with the length of the rest of the bracelet, because I don't want to go past this mark. I want to try to get a knot right in here somewhere, as close as we possibly can. Doesn't have to be exact, but you do want it to be pretty close. Okay, 1 more bead on each one. We're going to bring all those down, and then we are going to finish off our bracelet. All right, so we've got 3 beads. Bring those down. Looks like I'm going to be pretty darn close here. So I'm going to go ahead, wrap around my fingers. And pull down the knot. Tighten each strand. And that was pretty close. I could not have measured that out better. I think I got lucky on that one. All right, so now we have all of our bracelet. Check it out. Looks like we've got 4 strands. We've got 2 strands of leather. We have our braided strands, or I'm sorry, our flat knot, square knot strand here. And we have our little bead bundles here. So it looks like we've got several bracelets, but it's really just one. So now what we want to do is we want to finish this off. Remember how up here at the top, we had 3 square knots with all of our strands of B-Lon? We want to do the same thing down here. So we want to treat these individual strands. Now, I don't know about you, but I forgot that I had wrapped around down here. I tried to pull this guy free. Make sure you get all 3 of your strands, okay, on both sides. And we're just going to create another square knot down here on our leather. And we're going to use the ends of our 2 beaded sections to do that. So I'm going to do a P shape across. Taking my left strand, just the same things. Under, up through, and pull. Whoops, missing a strand there. Okay. And now we're going to do the left side, our P shape, and up through. So we're using all 6 strands, 3 on each side, right? That's going to bring everything back down to a single strand on our bracelet. Okay, now we're going to finish this with 2 more. So the right-handed P, left-handed side, make sure you go over those, behind the core, up through, and pull. Do the left side, same way. There's 2, we need 1 more. P shape. And pull. Last step is here on the left. And pull. All right, so now we're ready to really and truly finish this off. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to the top. We're going to take this off of the tying station. So I'm going to remove the washer, remove the acrylic plate, loosen up the end, free your leather, and take your loop off of the peg. Put everything back so that I don't lose that washer. Okay. All right, move the tying station out because we don't need it. So one end is already finished because that's where we started, right? But now we're down here on the other end and we need to finish this off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to the back, whichever side you decide is the back, right? Because they look very, very similar. I'm going to take my 2 strands of the B-Lon and I'm just going to tie an overhanded knot with those. And I'm going to bring that knot down to the back of the last square knot that we made. And I want to pull that down really tight because I don't want to, you can if you want to, but I don't want to tie another knot here just because it's going to make big bulky mess. So I'm really going to pull tight on this. Okay. Really, really tight. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off some of this. We will trim it all the way off in a minute, but I am going to shorten these strands up just so that they are a little bit easier to manage and work around. But I'm going to take some Hypo cement, this little guy right here with the pinpoint tip, and that's exactly why I love it so much. And we're going to add some of this to that knot that we just created. And I do like a real thin layer all the way over that knot. So kind of anywhere that B-Lon is kind of folded over. And this will dry clear, so you don't have to worry that it's going to leave a white haze or a nasty film or anything like that. Okay. Now it's going to take a while for that to dry. It will go to tacky in just a matter of moments. And when it gets to that tacky stage, you can trim your cord nice and short. You can even kind of melt that with your you know, your wildfire cutter or whatever you've got. If you want to, maybe just a lighter. I don't necessarily do that because I have a tendency to ruin mine. So I don't ever do that. But if you want to, please go for it. All right, now the last thing we need to do is add a button to this so that we have a closure and then of course trim off our ends. And you've got 2 options here. You can go ahead and tie an overhanded knot here if you want to before you slide on your button, or you can just slide your button right on up. I'm going to forego that last knot and I'm just going to slide my button on. It only fits on 1 piece of our leather cord. I'm okay with that. I'm going to bring it down. Okay, come to the back. And now I'm going to tie an overhanded knot with my leather cord. And I want to pull that knot down underneath the button if I can. Or as close to your button as you can get it. Okay, now if you struggle to get your knot nice and tight, you definitely can come in with your pliers. There's no shame in using your tools. That's what your tools are for, right? And really give it a good tug to tighten down that knot. Okay, we're at tacky. So I'm going to go ahead and trim off. After you trim off, if you want to add more Hypo cement to this, right where you've trimmed, you can. Just for a little added extra insurance, I'm going to. So just where I trimmed, because I don't melt my ends. And then the very last thing to do is to trim off your leather fringe. I like to leave my leather fringe a little long, but it is too long for me at this stage. So I'm going to trim some of this off. However, if you leave this really long, say you started out with a very long piece of your leather and you've got, you know, quite a bit here, you can actually add beads to these ends, some large hole beads, and tie knots and have some decorative fringe here. I'm just going to come in and trim off, leave about an inch, inch and a half, something like that behind. And that's it. That's it. That's all it takes. The last thing you want to do is just let your glue dry. I would probably give it 12 hours to dry just to really, really set up before you do any heavy wear with this, like, you know, your normal day. But otherwise, you're good to go, right? You just loop your button through your little loop and you've got a multi-strand design. Looks like you've got, you know, 4 strands. But you don't have to mess with 4 clasps, right? All comes down to just 1. And this can be changed up. You can change up the looks, you can change up the colors, the beads, whatever you want, and you can change up the button. You could definitely turn this into a guy's bracelet. I struggle with men's jewelry, so that was originally that's what my thought was on this was, you know, be really cool, maybe a Father's Day bracelet, just kind of alter it a little bit. But there you go. All right, guys, I'm going to turn you around so we can look at this from a different angle, and then we will say our goodbyes. I really appreciate you guys joining me for this class today. I hope that you have enjoyed this project. I hope that I have inspired you to go on and create some fun things with your tying station. If you don't have a tying station, I definitely recommend grabbing one because I use my tying station for so many things. And of course, you noticed I have more than one, and that is also, you know, if you're one of those people who has multiple projects going on at once, I have more than one tying station just for that reason, because a lot of times I'll start something. Macrame projects can take a while, right? And I will need my tying station for something else. So I have more than one. But so here's our bracelet if you want to see it, what it looks like on. And you can kind of twist this around too if you want to mix up your strands so that those leather strands are not directly in the center. You just want to kind of replace, you know, just kind of twist and space them out a little bit on your wrist so that it goes more like that if you want to. However you want, just let it do its thing, right? Look really good in brown too, by the way. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I know I already said that, but I can't thank you enough. So I appreciate you joining me for today's class. I look forward to seeing you guys again next time with another fun project. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your week and go create something beautiful, guys. Bye, guys.